Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Knife Standards RR3, which actually I talked about a while ago, and I'm just now doing the review, so sorry about that, but many of you will be really happy to find out that this is still available. You can buy this knife right now. I'll have it linked down in the description. Thanks so much to Knife Standards for supplying this knife for review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife real quick. This is my favorite that's come out from Knife Standards. I think I've handled one or two other models. I've seen some of their other stuff. They always do a good job. I'm just going to let you guys know from the beginning, this is definitely my favorite one. I'm going to talk all about it here, but overall length of the RR3 coming in at 7¼ inches. It's deceptively small. It's not a small knife. It's just, I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have guessed closer to 8 inches. And I think it's because the profile is so open. The overall blade length is coming in at about 3 1/8. The cutting edge is coming in at about 2.9 inches. I'll let you guys take a look at the cards here. There's a couple of things that if you're watching on your TV and you want to get your phone up there real quick, you can do that. But this is the configuration that was sent to me, and you can see all of the other configurations that are or were available at one point. Anyways, size comparisons up against some knives you may be familiar with. Any custom scales in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others, up against the 8010 and the 8020.5. So you can see here it's actually really similar to the overall size of the 8020.5, but again, because of the open ergonomic profile, it seems larger in a good way. Not in a cumbersome way, but in a good way. Up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Once again, it's about the same size as the smaller comparison here, but with quite a bit more cutting edge than the Para 3. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How is the action on this knife? The action is really nice. So first of all, this does have a nested liner lock that is slightly, I think, maybe I'm lying to myself. It seems like it's slightly cut above the show side scale, but probably not. Either way, there's an enormous amount of access because of this huge scallop over here and the slight scallop on the liner lock side. It is really, really easy to disengage, and there's plenty of room for an unsharpened surface to come down and contact your finger while you're disengaging it. So it's really easy to manipulate. The detent is tuned just right for something that is both thumb stud opener and front flipper. The front flipper is, in this situation, like, I don't love front flipper, like in terms of like a primary means of deployment, right? It's not my preferred means of deployment, but it's fine. Like when they're there, I'll find myself kind of fidgeting with it or playing with it. It's not the deployment I'll use if I have an option. Like if I'm going to get this out and actually use it, I'm going to use whatever the other option is. In this case, the thumb stud. But the front flipper works, and what I really appreciate about this is that the front flipper is basically, for those who aren't going to use it or don't like front flippers, it's basically non-existent because this is a perfect 90 degrees and matches up with the top of the frame. So it might as well not be there. I like that a lot. That's very pleasant for me aesthetically. I don't like how they look when they stick up past the frame, so that's something I really like. But yeah, reverse flicking it or just thumb flicking it is great because the thumb studs are a good size. They've got a good texturing. There's plenty of room to get in underneath them, and the detent is tuned properly. Also, the pivot action is really, really nice. Let's do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's a little thicker than you might have guessed. I'm not going to call it thick. It is like the handle scales are noticeably thicker than the blade. So it's kind of an awkward, like, contrast, I guess. But again, I don't want to call this a thick frame. It's just, it's thicker than something like the Para 3, which might throw some people off. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. This is where this knife gets, very compact and easy to carry. This is, the majority of my pleasant experience carrying this knife came from the profile this way, because it's kind of just like a soft rectangle. Lengthwise, it's almost exactly the same closed up as the Para 3 without being nearly as tall. It's way smaller than the PM2. Materials. So this is manufactured by Bestech, if you were wondering. We have titanium, textured titanium. No titanium backspacer, which is fine. You have nested steel liners in this guy. I'm guessing because that, well, number one, you have the nested liner lock, but there's also a nested liner on this side. And it's probably because if we take a look at the card here, your other options might include some other scale material that would require, or maybe he just preferred to use the steel to back it up on the inside. Sometimes we see that when one of the options is carbon fiber or something like that. But this was the one that was sent to me, and I looked on their website and seeing different inlay materials and things like that, but there's probably one of the scale materials that I missed that would make sense of the nested liner there. We do have a steel nested liner in this case and titanium scales. To my knowledge, this is the base version, but if I'm wrong about that, please correct me. And then we have VANAX for the blade steel. That's a big thing to remember there. Normally, I try to remind people that, why did I say people? People? Normally, I try to remind people that materials are just one part of the equation, an important part of the equation, but only one part of the equation when we're considering the final price tag. There are some materials that are substantially more expensive than other materials, right, in their respective class, right? VANAX is one of those blade materials that is just flat out expensive. That is an expensive blade material, right? It's like MagnaCut or some of the other specialty stuff that we see. It is more costly to purchase this stuff directly from, in this case, VANAX would be Bowler. But like, you know, MagnaCut would be Crucible. It's just more expensive for these companies to purchase this stuff. So this is not like a Chinese VANAX. No, Bestech purchased it from Bowler and then, you know, built a blade out of it. But VANAX is definitely a huge part of the equation when we're considering the final price tag. So that's really cool. They're hardening it to 60 to 61, which is appropriate. I think that's just fine. So titanium, a little bit of steel, titanium for the pocket clip, and a VANAX blade. The weight on this guy, whoops, just about pulled apart my, this was sitting on the vent, the ramp, whatever, the mount for the laptop, and I about ripped it apart. 4.3 ounces, which again is probably a little heavier than some of you might think, but then again, it's just 4.3 ounces. Balance though, quite a ways from the pivot. And that's because the blade stock is on the thinner side, and you have a combination of, you know, pretty good chunks of titanium with steel liners on the inside. Not that big of a deal, right? But if you're a stickler for balance, this is quite a ways from the pivot. Still though, overall 4.3 ounces and very compact folded up. It shouldn't be that big of a deal to most people. Let's go ahead and get out my tools and do a hardware check. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I believe these are T8. Yes, so we have T8 for the pivot. You have one T8 body screw, and then you have another body screw here that's also like what you would use for the pocket clip on the other side, which is really cool because you can mount it on the other side. But really, really minimal in terms of what's required to take it apart and put it back together, and that's like my favorite thing in the whole world. So the combination of T8 screws and them being minimal, and the fact that it's a nested liner lock with bearings, that makes this incredibly simple to take apart and put back together. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. All right, let's measure the blade stock thickness here real quick. Blade stock thickness of this guy is coming in at 115 thousandths or so, 114, something in there, thin, right? So even though it's not super duper balanced, right, this is, the benefit of having the scales a little bit thicker means that in this case, because of the ergonomic profile and the texturing, I find it to be a bit more comfortable than if the scales were substantially thinner. And then also the blade being on the thinner side with a flat grind makes it super duper utilitarian. I mean, yeah, they could have gone hollow, sure, but you have a really thin edge. So that's a big benefit there. I feel like a decent trade-off for, you know, not like perfectly optimized balance, right? It just kind of depends on how much you value that stuff, how important all that stuff is to you. Yeah. So let's see, we've done the hardware check, we've done all that. Yeah, I think it's time to move on to the meat and potatoes here. The Knife Standards knives, which are, like, to my knowledge, modeled after trains, and they have this unique aesthetic while still being very classic in profile. which is getting tricky to do. I think a lot of people would look at this and say that just looks like plain classic. I don't see anything unique about that. I mean, it depends on your perspective. But the combination of the texturing here, that's like we have the horizontal lines on the flat here, and then on the bevel we have the diagonal lines, and then we have the captive pivot head over here. I don't know. There's the way that these knives look to me is cool in terms of like, it's obviously a classic utilitarian profile, but at the same time, there's just something, it's got personality, which is, it's becoming more and more rare as we move forward in the knife world, and all designs are kind of being sculpted and melted down into this really generic minimalist, like every other thing that comes out just looks blah. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate that this has a little bit of personality while maintaining its functional aspects, I guess. Ergonomics, they are very good. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing I've ever handled, but they are very, very good. That's how I would score this, right? You want to go back here into the standard hammer grip, right? Very comfortable. Choke up spot, it's not really a choil, it's just a flat area, but it is nice and comfortable. There is a bit of a ledge here, but I'm not going to call it sharp. It's just like there's a ledge. Right, the bevel here is prominent enough that it gives you a little bit of a build up to that ledge instead of being this hard, abrupt drop off. And so I think that's what's making it comfortable. That and the fact that the scales are thicker than you might expect on a knife like this. So overall, the handle is really comfortable. On top of that, the pocket clip stops at about the 50% line, and it is not a clip with a bill that's going, directly into the middle of your hand. So that's also comfortable. The texturing is meaningful without being crazy. And given that the texturing runs, the same way as the clip, in and out of the pocket, it won't fray your pants up. So that's a nice way to add texturing, like meaningful texturing to the knife that allows for traction, or, additional, I guess, comfort and security in the grip, without destroying your pants as you take it in and out of your pocket every single day. So I really like that. I think that that's a big benefit there. The blade is very, very simple. We have, I don't know what you guys want to call this. Do you want to call it a modified drop point, or is there some more technical? I don't know. Whatever you want to call it is fine. It's incredibly simple, very, very straightforward. I honestly don't know that I'd expect anything. About caught myself there, just got the dead skin. I don't know that I'd expect anything wild to come out of here. I mean, too wild and you kind of take away from the intended aesthetic here. So I feel like this was pretty purposeful and pretty expected. But it's also like an incredibly utilitarian blade shape. You have a thin blade stock, flat grind, down to a nice thin cutting edge, and it's VANAX. If you don't know the benefits of VANAX, I'll let you know. VANAX is not identical, but very similar to MagnaCut. It is insanely stain resistant, even more corrosion resistant than MagnaCut. It's very tough and has good edge retention. It's actually potentially slightly higher. If we make two identical blades with the exact same geometry, one out of MagnaCut, one out of VANAX, both of them are heat treated optimally. VANAX will have slightly better edge retention, but it isn't quite as tough. So that multi-directional teeter-totter, very similar to MagnaCut, but not quite the same. VANAX makes for a wonderful pocket knife blade material. You basically don't have to worry about it. You don't have to baby it because, like I said, it's even more stain resistant than MagnaCut, and MagnaCut is up there. I mean, they make Spyderco Salt Series knives out of MagnaCut. So with VANAX, you are good to go. If you don't like to have to I don't really want to be worrying about oiling it and babying it all the time, VANAX, it's really good. It's one of my favorite steels of all time. I really, really enjoy it. And with the 60 to 61 HRC, some people say they want their VANAX up to 62. Right in there, 60 to 62 is optimal for VANAX, so you're good to go. But yeah, it's going to be nice and easy to touch up, given the fact that we've got a little belly here, but no hard angles or anything like that. You have a decent tip. It's not an incredibly pokey tip, but you've got a tip for sure, so you're good. Something else I really like about this knife is it does say, VANAX right here, but from this side, you just have the RR initials on the pivot. That's it. There's really no billboarding of any kind, so it's got a nice, clean, nearly sterile aesthetic. And, you know, ask 100 people in the knife community, and probably 95 of them are going to say the less billboarding, the better. I mean, 99 of them are going to say, yeah, keep the words and the things off the blade. I just want to look at the knife, right? So I do appreciate that that's the case there. I like this very clean look. This particular version is what I would order if I was ordering it. So I like the stone washed blade and the stone milled, I guess. That's what they call this. This particular one is a stone milled. That's what it has up here. But then the blade finish says stone washed. Handle finish says stone milled. That's what I would order. I think this looks really, really nice. Again, really, really easy to disengage. That heavy scallop on the inside here just makes it so easy and so comfortable to disengage. So I really like that. It's such a nitpicky little spot for me that they got exactly right. We have a wonderful design in terms of, you know, accommodating for lefties. By the way, these are numbered. They are limited. So if you're not, you know, at some point these will be gone. This is number 23. I don't know exactly how many they're making, but it does say production run number 1, implying that they could do a number 2, number 3, et cetera, et cetera. Probably just depends on how well this one does. But anyways, I started to say, oh, we were talking about the disengagement there, and then we talked about we were about to talk about the pocket clip. This is accommodating for lefties, right? The lefties, you are going to be dealing with a right-handed liner lock, but as you can see here, I am a right-hand dominant person, and I have no problem manipulating this with my left hand. So it's really nice that we've got accommodations for lefties here. I feel like this is a good way to do this without making too much of an eyesore. It also looks like it might accept some of your wire clips, some of your Spyderco wire clips, but then again, I'm not 100% certain about that, so don't quote me on that. But it is nice that this clip can be switched over to the other side, and it's just a single screw holding it in, and that screw is responsible for the frame or the integrity of the thing, which is really, really nice. It's a nice way to minimize the hardware and still have the pocket clip nested and able to stay in place on both sides. So really good. Like I said, in and out of the pocket is a breeze thanks to a generic but very, very functional milled clip. I also like that they added the texturing here. This would have looked really lazy had they not included the same texturing on top of the clip as the material, the frame material underneath. So I really, really like that. Pivot on this side is very basic, but that's fine. The nice thing here is that it's captive, so when you go to adjust it or take it apart, you don't need 2 drivers, which is a hilarious thing that we still have to deal with in 2024. But fortunately, these guys are smart enough to not include the double pivot thing. We have a stop pin that is internal, attached to the blade, so it sort of rides on channels carved out on either side of the titanium, and it actually stops on the steel parts, which now that I think about it, might be the reason that they included those. I just don't remember seeing any other scale materials outside of, at least, I mean, again, they have inlay materials, right? Maybe they have some special stuff for the customs. I don't remember seeing any materials like G10 or carbon fiber for the frame as an option when I went to the website. Maybe they had other versions of it that are no longer available, or it might be that they are, you know, making it easier on themselves if they decide to offer different scale materials in the future. So if I missed that, my fault. But it does stop on the steel, which is nice. I think that's going to increase the longevity of the lockup, especially considering the liner itself is not titanium, it's steel. I always like to see when they kind of go that extra step, they give you a titanium nested liner with a steel lock bar insert, but it's totally unnecessary. As long as the contact is steel to steel, then you get the benefit of the lock bar life being increased. So the combination of the stops contacting a steel liner and a steel liner contacting the steel, lock face of the blade means that this should continue to lock up for a very, very long time. The liner lock on this is good. That's all that I require, right? If it can survive that, then it can survive everything that I'm going to use it for. So they did a good job with that. That's really, really great. Bestech usually does. I've had an issue with some of their button locks, but not their liner locks. No blade play, up, down, left, or right. No lock stick. No pivot lash. Very smooth. Incredibly smooth and consistent in here. And a nice detent. It's a lighter detent, not on the light side, just like kind of a medium detent. No it's not off center. Just it's centered is the best way to say that. And no pivot lash, or I'm sorry, not pivot lash, detent lash. The only downside to this knife is that it's really expensive, right? Now, keep in mind, number one, we do have premium materials, and one of the biggest factors there is VANAX. That's one of those blade steels that's, that's gonna cost you an extra penny there for sure. So that's a big factor. There's no milled back spacer, which would have looked nice, but it wouldn't have changed the cost that much. The other thing that we have to remember is when these designers work with companies like Bestech and they're doing things in small batches, Bestech makes it really hard for them to price these in a way that is beneficial. It allows them to make money. Bestech charges these companies out the butt to do these projects. And it's kind of crazy, right? The only way to get those prices to come down oftentimes is for the batch to be massive. Like if they do a batch that's, 3, 4, 5 times the size, 10 times the size, then Bestech probably gives them a bit of a discount. But it's hard for them to do that when they can't really be certain about the demand for this stuff, right? So it ends up, in order for them to be able to make a little bit of money on what is essentially a passion project, they have to charge quite a bit of money. So I personally would have liked to see this closer to 300, if not right at 300, and these come in at 350. I don't love that, but I don't necessarily blame Knife Standards for having to, arrive at that price tag. And again, it's a little bit of a softer blow. The reason, a lot of people are saying, why 300? Why not 250? VANAX. It really is expensive. Like that stuff is not cheap to purchase or anything. So it's not like an amazing price tag, but is it incredibly offensive? No, not versus the other things that I handle, right? So if you, consider my perspective to be one that has a lot of foundation to it, then that's what I'm saying there. I think it's priced a little high, but it's not like, oh my gosh, right? So if you don't care about VANAX, and you're not really interested in, paying a little bit extra for somebody who is a designer working with an OEM and just has to deal with the parameters of pricing, right? There's nothing they can really do about it. Then it might not be for you. I mean, there are plenty of really, really great knives out there that are made out of titanium and maybe not VANAX. Like you can get VANAX through, for example, Kunwu. Kunwu will make a knife out of VANAX and titanium with very similar overall fit and finish and quality and all that stuff. And you can get it for about $70 less in a lot of cases, right? But again, I can't really blame Knife Standards for this, for that price increase, right? So yeah, if you really like how this looks, are you going to be happy with the overall quality and how it functions? Oh yeah, it's a great tool. It's very comfortable in the pocket. It's nice to hold on to. It's very easy to manipulate. There's a lot of little things here that make this a really, really good tool, but you have to really want to pick this up, right? You're not necessarily buying something that's going to give you an advantage over, a lot of the competition, and there is a lot of competition, right? But this is enthusiast territory, and as we all know, knife enthusiasts will buy what speaks to them, so if this speaks to you, you will enjoy it. If it doesn't speak to you, there's a lot of other stuff out there to pick from. In any case, this is cool. This is a good knife. I like it. Knife Standards, thank you so much for sending this in and letting me check it out and share it with everybody. That's going to be it today. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.